Good morning from our global headquarters in New York. I'm Menace Cranny alongside Danny Berger. Welcome to Bloomberg Brief. Let's set the agenda.
An election reset. President Biden endorses VP Kamala Harris as he steps aside. Donations surge past $50 million. And the Trump trade challenged. The dollar slips, the curve flattens as the election shakeup raises volatility. And we'll get reactions from Republican Senator Jerry Moran and Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen in the next half hour. Good morning, Menace. Great to have you back.
Danny, good morning. I leave you for 1 week and the entire political system in the United States of America just does a somersault. And again, the debate is going to be whether we have an open challenge at the Democratic convention, or is the Queen arising, who it is, Kamala Harris, in terms of the charge at the Democratic Party. Last week, it was ground zero. The bond market was ground zero in terms of the reaction function post the debate, post the assassination. And again, this morning, we look at this reappraisal. Winshaw say this: if Kamala Harris is on the ticket, it dims the odds of a Republican sweep. And that is why you see this repricing from the tariffs, the immigration policy, etc. That is the risk in the bond markets. You also have $183 billion of twos, fives and sevens coming down the pike this week. NASDAQ, you finally got your great rotation. I went away for 5 days and you got that heft into the Russell index and that drop in the NASDAQ by 4%. NVIDIA claws back some of the 9% losses that we had last week. But again, it's going to be an interesting one. Julian Emmanuel says the correction has begun in time and price. We get a little bit of insight this week in terms of the tech spending. Alphabet will hit the numbers. And this was the paragon that displayed the Trump trade, or the red sweep, as it were. Bitcoin, it just touched a 1-month high this morning, Danny. So a lot of volatility to come in the countdown to the Democratic Congress.
You put it really well, Menace, because it is this catch-22 for the party. Do they have what many see as an undemocratic coronation of Kamala Harris? But on the other side of things, you could have a very contested convention that would expose already what we've seen, that is rifts in this Democrat Party. Yeah. Because you've had the split-screen programming, you've had the RNC in the show of unity, all of Trump's former rivals lining up behind him to endorse him. What happens if that's not what we get from the Democrats? Already you have a good sign with the biggest fundraising day of this cycle, over $55 million for the Democratic Party. But is that thrown into question when you have the likes of Joe Manchin weighing a race?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see who does stand up, as it were, and be counted on this. There was one of the most watched TV events was Trump's acceptance speech. And I love what Mike Novogratz had to say about this. An open convention. It's a mini bake-off, and it's going to get more press publicity and coverage than anything in the whole world for the next month. I think he has a point, which is if you really want to challenge the narrative from the Republican Party and from their candidate, this is a prime opportunity to really tell you, if it is Kamala Harris, who is she, what does she represent, and where's she going to take the country?
Does it look like a bake-off or a UFC cage match? I think that's part of the questions that we're going to have to see. Exactly. A bake-off sounds lovely. It sounds very peaceful. Well, anyway, this is our top story because President Biden's historic decision to exit the White House does kick off a 3-month sprint to the November vote. Keep in mind, the DNC is just a couple of weeks away in Chicago. Bloomberg's Vonnie Quinn is in D.C. for us on what to expect next. Vonnie, let's talk about the possibility that this is an open convention. What could it look like, and who could possibly challenge Kamala Harris at this point?
Well, that's just it, Danny. I think the possibility is actually dimming. Throughout the afternoon on Sunday, you saw this bevy of endorsements come in from really key figures, everybody from AOC to Elizabeth Warren, Jim Clyburn, the Congressional Black Caucus. And at one point, there were state delegations saying, we are endorsing Kamala Harris. And that particular element is important because that was one of the areas that the Republicans were going to attack on. They were actually threatening to bring legal action because, of course, it was the President Joe Biden, who had secured those primary votes from the states. Well, if all of the states come together and rally and project unity as the party seems to want, well, that will sort of take the air out of any argument from the Republicans on that score. That said, you mentioned Joe Manchin. He did say that he might try to re-enter this race to an aide who then has reported it in the press. We will see. He's supposed to be on the US morning shows in a couple of hours' time, and he's going to give Fox News an interview tomorrow as well. But he would have to re-register as a Democrat. It's also not clear what kind of demographics he would appeal to versus Kamala Harris, right? So we will see. The other point to make is that it was really interesting to see the lack of people coming out and trying to challenge Kamala Harris. If anything, you had people trying to to potentially position themselves as VP pick. And again, we're going to be hearing from some state governors in the morning, in a few hours, on some of the US television shows that are obviously trying to put their names in the hat, right? And most of these are from swing states. Josh Shapiro, he's not going to be on the morning shows yet, as far as we know, but he is one of the key names to watch. There's also, of course, Roy Cooper. There's the governor of Kentucky. There's the governor of Minnesota as well, Timothy Waltz, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. They're all in the list. Gretchen Whitmer has suggested to aides that she wouldn't want to run this time, that it's a complicated race. Gavin Newsom has also said he's not going to do it. That would be two from California, and that's not what the Democrats need right now.
It's interesting if they go for somebody perhaps who is a foil to Vance. Now, Vonnie, follow the money. In the end of the day, it sort of comes down to that. Danny mentioned the figure. It's over $50 million. It's maybe near $60 million that's been raised by the Democrats in the past 24 hours. But the mega donors are out there, and they will have a huge say in terms of where we go next. So what has been the response mechanism? The likes of Soros is a hard hitter when it comes to the funding of the Democratic Party. Follow the money for me.
Yeah, exactly. Soros has always said that he is going to continue to back Kamala Harris, so that potentially will bring in more big donors. You mentioned that huge amount of fundraising, the biggest day so far this campaign, in fact, 3 times the previous biggest day, which was right after the debate, almost 70 million, in fact. And that was small donor dollar donations, which is really interesting. It shows how much the base of the party, the grassroots members, have been energized by this new name that's come to the fore. Even if they know Kamala Harris. They're going to need all that money, though, Manus and Danny, because Trump has been out fundraising them, right? Or at least he did in June. We won't have the July figures until August. But in June, there was about a $30 million gap between the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign. $128 million raised by Trump. And that was before the assassination attempt. Yeah. So we'll have to see how much more money we can see flow into the Democratic coffers. They'll certainly be out fundraising in force over the next few days.
Bonnie, you had mentioned that one of the key attack lines the Republicans had used was using their unity against that of the Democrats, of a divided Democrats. If we do have the show of unity, not just that, but the line of Joe Biden's age, if that's no longer usable to a GOP, to a Trump campaign, how does their strategy need to change in the coming days to react to a possible Kamala Harris presidential candidate?
Well, we already know that they have in place a plan to attack Kamala Harris as being weak, right? The former President Donald Trump has been on Truth Social all day long. Couldn't help himself, continued to put out posts suggesting that Biden was weak, but that Kamala would be easier to beat. Now, bear in mind, this is not what MAGA Republicans had been saying right before today's announcement or Sunday's announcement. MAGA Republicans had been suggesting that Biden should stay because he would be easier to beat. Well, now they've turned the tables. They've decided that Kamala will be easier to beat if she is indeed the nominee. But we know that one of the reasons the Trump campaign was trying to fundraise so hard was because they have put a fortune into attack ads, and we'll start to see those rolling out over the next few days, absolutely no doubt, even before it's fully finalised that Kamala Harris is the nominee, should she be the nominee. And that will be definitely part of the strategy. We also obviously know that they may try an attack on the legal front as well, as I mentioned earlier. We'll see if that actually goes forward.
OK, and as we sat down to do this show today, Danny and I were just chatting about the role that Kamala Harris has as that border czar, and that is one of the sore points of this campaign. Vonnie, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks for working late and long for us in Washington, Vonnie Quinn. Other stories, there are other stories, believe it or not, trending on the Bloomberg terminal this Monday morning. China caught investors by surprise with an interest rate cut overnight. The PBOC cut the 7-day reverse repo rate to 1.7%. It's the first reduction in almost a year, and the attempt is to prop up growth.
Deutsche Bank is bidding to become one of Wall Street's main European rivals for serving America's rich. The head of the bank's U.S. wealth unit plans to add as many as a dozen senior private bankers this year. Deutsche Bank reports their earnings on the 24th.
Ryanair cut its outlook for ticket prices in the crucial summer travel period. It joins Lufthansa, Delta and other airlines in a warning to investors. The CFO spoke to Bloomberg about the customer outlook.
The consumer is a little bit more frugal, a little bit more cautious about how they're spending their money, and they want to get away. Ryanair is the lowest cost, so we can afford to have the lowest fares. And we're happy to hit the traffic targets, and if we have to price accordingly, we will do.
Coming up in the show, we'll hear from the Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas and the Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, live from the Farnborough Air Show.
And later this hour, we're going to be catching up with Anna Rosenberg. She is the head of geopolitics at Amundi on the presidential race. Here on your brief.
It's Bloomberg Brief. I'm Manus Cranley alongside Danny Berger in New York. Well, the Democrats are cheering on President Biden's exit from the election race, scoring more than $50 million in donations just on Sunday alone since the announcement. Let's get the reactions from U.S. lawmakers who are at Farnborough Air Show. Guy Johnson is there. You're talking politics and planes, Guy. Good morning.
It's the perfect combination, politics and aerospace. What more could you want on a Monday morning? Manus, thank you very much indeed. Yes, welcome from a blustery Farnborough Air Show. This year's event obviously has been overshadowed by the political developments that we've seen in the United States overnight. So let's get a take now on what that ultimately means, not only for the country, but also for the aerospace industry. I'm joined by Senator Jerry Moran, Republican from Kansas, and Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire. I'm going to start with you, Senator. Understandably. Obviously, the news overnight comes as a shock, but not as a shock. Is Vice President Harris the right choice, do you think, now to take on Joe Biden's mantle? Do you think others should be given a choice? I appreciate you've been over here for the last few days, but you must have a view on what is happening here.
Well, first of all, it's nice to be here at the Farnborough Air Show. Senator Moran and I are co-leading a bipartisan delegation from all across the United States. We're mostly appropriators, so we fund airplanes like the ones we see behind us. But we're also on the Armed Services Committee, some of us. So it's exciting to be here to see what's happening and to promote United States innovation. On politics, I haven't been in the United States for several days, but it's going to be a very interesting process. People are very excited. I think Vice President Harris has moved very quickly to build support, but the delegates to the convention will decide ultimately if she gets the nomination. So I think we'll see a lot of activity in the coming weeks.
Would you support her?
We are waiting for the president to address the nation later this week. President Joe Biden has done an excellent job investing in America over the last 4 years. He deserves a tremendous amount of respect and credit for his willingness to step down in what he believes is the best interest of the country. So I'm going to wait to hear from him.
But do you have a candidate in mind, I guess is the real question?
I do not.
Right, so you at the moment are reasonably agnostic on who you think ultimately should be his successor. We'll wait for the plane to take off so that we can hear your answer.
Well, no, I think it will be important to have someone who will carry on the mantle of the president, and clearly the vice president has done that, but we're going to wait and see.
So a continuity candidate would be something that you would be looking for?
I think that's important.
Okay. Let's look at it from the other side of the aisle. We're sitting here in Europe. There is serious concern over here about what a Trump 2.0 presidency would ultimately mean. We all heard what J.D. Vance said the other day at the RNC. There is a concern that America is going to become more isolationist. Is that your perspective?
It is not my hope, and it's certainly nothing that is foretold. That's not going to happen if we get the right policies in place. For 75 years, Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, America has been hugely engaged in NATO, supportive of the cause, and at a time in which Putin has invaded Russia, Russians have invaded Ukraine, it is not a time for America to back off of its commitment around the globe. My experience in being here and talking to foreign leaders is that they have significant determination, but it takes the United States to have success. And so as a team, Europeans and Americans, NATO's and our allies have a role to play in the world. And I think there's a justification for us making certain that we do the right things in a way that we share the burdens with our allies. Yep. But I don't expect America to walk away from the world in any administration.
So you You voted for Ukraine aid in the past.
I did.
Do you think that that aid is at risk?
I do not. But again, President Trump, when he was president, made it pretty clear that he expects our European allies, our fellow NATO members, to do more. And that was absolutely the right thing, to encourage and, in fact, to insist that they do so. And we've seen results of that. It's happening. And again, I think there's a path forward in Ukraine for success, for a victory. And I think that it's important for us to continue to pursue this cause.
And I think it's important to point out that that aid package passed overwhelmingly in both the House and Senate with strong bipartisan support. So while it took longer than any of us had hoped, it got there with a lot of strong bipartisan support.
Do you think that a democratic government in the United States, a Democrat government in the United States would be less isolationist than a Republican administration?
Look, I expect whoever the next president is to do what's in the national security interests of the United States. Our role in the world, our role in NATO, in supporting the Ukrainians in this war, the unprovoked war that Russia has instigated in Ukraine, our support for the Indo-Pacific, for providing a counterbalance to China. All of that is in our interest. And whoever's president, I'm sure, is going to do what's in the best interest of the United States.
Let me make this point that the world is going to change. I mean, as politics is changing in the United States and you focus upon what's happening in the U.S., we're going to have additional challenges in the next 100 days, in the next 4 years. And as the world, our adversaries are aligning against us, from Iran and their proxies, Russia, the South Pacific, and China. So when you ask about whether or not the United States is going to be an isolationist country, one, the answer is no. But two, we're not going to have a choice because the challenges are going to be so great to our own nation.
But the priorities are important. Is Asia, is China a bigger priority than Europe? You talked about burden sharing. What does Europe need to do to share the burden adequately?
So a number of my colleagues were opposed to aid for Ukraine, Republican colleagues, because they said the focus should be China. But the reality is what we demonstrate with our European allies in Ukraine determines what happens, what response, what happens to the South Pacific and China is activity. So the world watches to see if we're capable. And we need to demonstrate that. And it's not just about Ukraine. It's about American security. And it's about making certain our adversaries, present and future, know that when America's committed to something, they're there for the long haul.
Benjamin Netanyahu is going to address a joint session in a few days' time. You sit on foreign relations. What do you want to hear?
I would like to hear him talk about what he plans to do to end this war. I would like to hear him say that they're going to increase humanitarian aid to all of those Palestinians affected in Gaza. I would like to hear him say that he's going to initiate elections in Israel so that the Israeli people who have been demonstrating against his leadership understand that there's the potential for an option. I would like to hear him say that he's going to figure out how to resolve some of the challenges with southern Lebanon, so that we don't see an increased war in southern Lebanon. So I hope he will talk about all of those issues. I would be surprised.
Yes, that is quite the list. Senator Shaheen, Senator Moran, thank you both indeed for joining us here at the Farnborough Air Show and braving the weather with me. It's great to see you both. Thank you very much indeed.
Weather.
Very British weather.
Great to be back with you. Thank you.
It's nice to see you both. Danny Berger in New York. Let me hand things back to you.
Guy, thank you very much. Braving the weather and a lot of jets taking off, too. Guy Johnson there at the Farnborough Air Show. Important to hear from two senators on the subcommittee for defense. Coming up, Delta gets called out by Secretary Buttigieg after canceling a third of their scheduled flights. We'll have more on that, speaking of airplanes, for you next. It's your Bloomberg Brief. I'm Danny Berger alongside Manus Cranny in New York. Okay, let's get you some of your front page news. A look at what's making headlines around the world. First up, the Washington Post has this, that the director of the U.S. Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, is facing new calls to resign. That's from a bipartisan group of lawmakers. It's after we saw this drip feed of news that top agency officials repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Trump's security detail before last weekend's assassination attempt.
And next up, you have a deadline looming for Warner Brothers Discovery. Monday is the deadline to match proposals for purchasing the next round of broadcast rights for the NBA. Pricey rights, they are expected to more than double in value to roughly $75 billion. $75 billion over 11 years. That's a lot of money for sport.
And people are willing to pay up for it. It brings the viewers they need it.
Look large.
Okay, Manus, we need to end on this. The New York Times says this story, that Delta canceled another 1,300 flights on Sunday and delayed another 1,600. First of all, it was very uneven with what airlines were able to get out and which still had issues. I mean, you look at Delta, planes were out of place. You had the personnel trying to catch up, already really diminished personnel post-COVID. Yeah. So it took all weekend for them still to try to sort this out.
So then why did American only cancel 100? So, you know, you've got to... I think what this whole story does is it throws into mind concentration risk. You are so exposed to one major provider. What do you do in these disaster recovery scenarios? I got back fine. Aer Lingus did not have a particular problem with this.
We're very thankful for that, Manus. It's good to see you back.
Back in the seat.
Everything's right with Manus back. From our global headquarters in New York, I'm Danny Berger alongside Manus Cranny. Let's set your agenda.
An election reset. President Biden endorses Vice President Kamala Harris as he steps aside to nation's surge past $50 million. Trump trade challenge. The dollar slips, the curve flattens as the election shakeup raises volatility. And we'll discuss what it means with international business leaders at Qatar Airways. The CEO joins us live from Farnborough International Air Show.
What does this uncertainty injection do to these markets? There's going to be a lot of information to absorb over the next week. Some of that curve flattening has taken a breather this morning. We're barely changed on your U.S. 10-year yield. It is a trade that has been challenged nonstop with the push and pull between economics and politics. This morning, it's unclear which way we go. S&P 500 futures, they go higher, up by 0.4%. Does the rotation continue to live? How much of it was positioning, CPI, and how much of it was politics? Potentially, when we all get scared, we run back to the safe corner of the big cap tech, and that is NVIDIA. That is up this morning. Meanwhile, Russell 2000 futures, they are higher, but not as much. Again, that rotation isn't playing out. For markets, all roads point to PCE data on Friday, GDP on Thursday, PMIs, and a big week for earnings, Manus.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of bond issuance coming down the pike as well across the curve. The question is this, the political chaos that you have at the moment, how toxic is it? How toxic is it for volatility? And do we now question whether the red sweep, and that's what really was driving the markets in the earlier part of last week, which was not just a presidency for Trump, but a red sweep, and whether that has potentially been rocked.
It's a good point. It's the down ballot races that matter, because that had been the concern that so many people raised to Biden. The Pelosi's of the world saying that not only are you under threat, but the down ballots are under threat.
Indeed. Well, one woman that is not under threat, but she's been working like Billy all weekend. It is our very own Anne-Marie Jourdain. She joins us now. And, of course, we're going to kick off a great deal of debate. You're not going to get any sleep for the next 3 weeks. Time's short. Tension is high. Run us through the choreography of what Kamala Harris has got to do to galvanize the Democratic Party behind her.
Well, the first date is going to be August 19th. That's when the DNC kicks off. But potentially, before Biden dropped out, there was talk from the DNC that they would hold this virtual roll call vote. If that happens, then potentially we go into the DNC with already the ticket picked. Obviously, to get there, she also needs to pick a vice president. A lot of reports overnight that yesterday she made a few calls to prospective potential running mates. You want to look at some of these governors, especially in swing states like North Carolina, Roy Cooper, Andy Bashir of Kentucky, and Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. These are three men to really hone in on, and potentially they could be her VP picks. Now, what you're seeing happen overnight is people thought potentially there'd be a lot of debate who would get the nominee or potential nominee. Biden, after he decided to drop out in that letter, about 30 minutes later came out and didn't endorse Harris. And then the endorsements came flooding in. Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, potentially someone who many were talking about taking the top of the ticket, came out and said her position in this campaign has not changed. She is going to help elect whoever's on that ticket. You had Gavin Newsom come out and endorse her. You had the Clintons come out and endorse her. And then I imagine today you're going to have more of the top ranks in Congress come out because they were mum yesterday on this. Hakeem Jeffries, Schumer, potentially take a look if they come out. So you do see Democrats coalescing around her. And then, of course, there's the grassroots money. Some $50 million. And this is what Greg Vellia has to say this morning. Harris gives the Democrats a lightning bolt of energy and crucial momentum against Trump. So it's basically a revamp of the Democrats. And there is energy behind her. How much does this stand? And also, of course, how do voters place her against Trump, who has been leading in all the polls?
And I think that's why the VP is also so important in that, too. But when we have reports, for example, that Joe Manchin is considering rejoining the Democrat Party and running, I mean, what would that do to this race?
Honestly, nothing. I mean, she has the support now of so many important people. People are going to view this as just noise. You were a Democrat, you decided to be an independent. Now you want to get back in the race because all of a sudden it's open. Earlier, too, on Sunday, before the reports of that, and his team came out and said that is true, he is looking at potentially becoming a Democrat again. He had told Margaret Brennan that he does think, on Face the Nation, that he does think there needs to be a new generation of leaders. So I think a lot of Democrats are talking about this as very rich and precious.
So let's work on the assumption that there's a bit of volatility, a bit of noise, but that Kamala Harris gets there. What does that mean? I mean, this is the sort of the worst case scenario for the Trump campaign because it had been so focused on the acuity of Biden, his age, etc. How do they pivot? What's it going to mean? Because this lady, this is a fighting, talking lady. She's not going. She's going to take him right on head to head.
Well, already you have Democrats coming out and saying it's the prosecutor versus the felon. That's how they want to try to paint the picture of what this race will be. I just got back from the RNC, and one thing I heard from a lot of Republicans is they want it to be Biden. The Trump campaign has already ran the data about what it would mean to go against Biden. What was interesting, Trump's 93-minute speech that I stood the entire time for on the floor, he only mentioned Biden twice. And then he kept calling it under this administration. Under this administration, potentially they were prepared for this to happen. But this is going to be a challenge. She is a woman. She is a black woman, also of Indian descent as well. This is someone who they're going to have to change how they talk about some issues, especially issues like abortion, women's reproductive rights. Trump did not talk about it once at his speech. This is something that Joe Biden has struggled to talk about, being a Catholic. He doesn't really love to talk about abortion. This is something that they leaned on Kamala Harris for. At the same time, Biden also gave talking about the root causes of immigration to Kamala Harris. They're going to say that she did not do a good job on that, and that is one key issue for voters.
It potentially makes J.D. Vance also a bit of a more awkward pick because you don't have that wide reach that a Nikki Haley would have. Potentially, Trump would have chosen a different running mate had he known this, but also at the same time, they look at Vance and they say, put him in the Rust Belt for 3 months. Pennsylvania, he is going to be basically living in Pennsylvania. Which is maybe why Josh Shapiro is an interesting candidate for VP for Kamala Harris. Anne-Marie, thank you so much. Anne-Marie Hordern, she will be back on air about 20 minutes time for Surveillance. They're going to cover this a lot, obviously, so tune in for that. In the meantime, let's bring in Anna Rosenberg, Amundi's head of geopolitics, for more. And it was only a week ago that you and I were discussing, will Biden stay in? He's not staying in. And you write that it's likely it will be a smooth transfer of power. How important is that for a party that has seemed so divided over the past 2 weeks?
Well, it's essential, really, for them to have a shot at winning this vote. Simply, if there is now a civil war, right, within the Democratic Party, which seems unlikely given that we had all this endorsement already behind Kamala Harris, that would be very bad for the Democratic Party because they're already starting with a major disadvantage. To have a change on the presidential ticket so late into the race is a big disadvantage, right, for any party. And they now have to make up for that. They still have a shot at it, right, despite there being, I think, a consensus that Trump was a shoo-in overall. They now need to put on a very slick performance. They need to stick together and to campaign in a very coherent way. They need to appeal to a broader audience. And the first step to doing all of that and to having a shot at winning this election is to have a smooth transfer of power and to be very disciplined.
How important, Anna, good morning to you. 25.5 million people watched Trump's acceptance speech. Anne-Marie stood through the whole thing of 93 minutes. How important is it at this Democratic convention that it is one of unity, cohesion, and a clear path forward under Kamala Harris, rather than a spectacle of a party which is riven by division? How important is it that it's a one-woman, on-the-ticket clarity narrative?
So it's important that it's going to be a spectacle, right? Because the Democrats now need to get a lot of visibility. And frankly, they're already getting that. Because it's only a few months into the vote. Yes, Kamala Harris has name recognition because she was the VP. But nevertheless, you need a lot of visibility because Trump clearly has a lot of visibility. Biden had that too. So you can have a spectacle. You just need to have a spectacle of unity. That is quite important. And that's what they will need to focus on for the next couple of months as the race continues. And in a way, I think there's one added advantage of this transition of power for Kamala Harris, is that she now needs to pick a running mate who can appeal to the broad voter base that she does not directly appeal to, right? Yeah. So you will likely have a white centrist male being picked by that. But she actually has a second running mate, if you will, and that is Joe Biden, because he's going to, in a way, campaign for her. And that means she has two people backing her up, which is a significant upside.
And a lot of people are going to be trying to understand what the polls say, two, if this changes policy, and three, just how it changes the odds of this race. As we try to understand this, what do you say to clients? Should they be making investment decisions over the next week or over the next few weeks ahead of the DNC to try to get their hands around? Is there some sort of Trump trade that I either want to put on or back off of?
I think at this point it is too early. Even what we have seen so far in terms of the Trump trade, there is a lot of uncertainty of what the second Trump administration would look like. There seems to be an idea, only because J.D. Vance is an isolationist, that this is the kind of foreign policy that we can expect from Trump. However, we have to keep in mind that there are three different foreign policy influences in a possible Trump administration. We have the restrainers and isolationists like Vance. We have the primacists who want to continue to see the U.S. being, the world police. And we have the prioritizers who want to make sure that every foreign policy goal is geared towards China. The next Trump administration will have to balance all these three different influences. And the second Trump administration, right? And as of now, it is not clear which of these influences is going to come out on top. So frankly, we don't know what the priorities are going to be like for a possible second Trump administration. Is it going to be to make America great again in the next 5 years, which means significant fiscal spending to inject into local manufacturing? Or is battling inflation going to be the majority priority? Those are the kind of questions we have to ask right now. And as a result of that, I think it's too early to know what this means for markets. So right now, it's sit tight and watch the space. There's a lot of uncertainties, and we have to see what happens with this transfer of power first.
With this level of volatility, Anna, last week we saw these Trump trades on steroids, more so at the start of the week with the steepeners. With Kamala Harris now on the ticket, is that just a headwind to Trump-like trades, or is it a body blow? From a risk point of view, should you be more cautionary rather than proactive in the Trump-like trades that we saw take hold last week?
It's a headwind, I would say, at this point, right? I think that there is still significant hurdles to jump through for a new Democratic nominee. But we have to say that right now, we don't have a base case for this election because simply it is all, we have to see how this new ticket unfolds, who is on her ticket, how does the transfer of power unfold in order to make a more confident call on what the outcome of the election is. So I would say hold your horses right now.
OK, hold our horses, hold our breath, and get through the news flow. Anna, thank you very much. Anna Rosenberg there, head of Geopolitics at Amundi, framing the narrative. Let's get to Farnborough International Show, where we can frame the narrative a little bit further. Guy Johnson is sitting down with the CEO of Qatar Airways. Guy, good morning.
Manus, thank you very much indeed. Badr Al Meer is the new CEO of Qatar Airways. It is fantastic to speak with him and have him join us here at the Farnborough Air Show. Nice to see you.
Very good to see you too.
Friday was a busy day for the aviation sector. Yeah. Talk me through the effects on your airline. Talk me through the effect that you're still seeing. Is there any effect that we're still seeing?
I'll talk about our airline and our airport. Thank God we were not affected out of our base in Doha. Everything was moving smoothly. Our on-time performance on that specific day was around 87-88%. But we were expecting some delays after our wave, because our early morning wave is basically going to Europe and the US. So we were expecting some delays for our flights coming back from Europe and the US, because the airports were getting busy, so many flights were getting cancelled. But luckily, it was better than what we expected from
What's the lesson?
Lesson, you always have to have plan B. If technology fails you, you need to go back to you need to have, again, you need to depend on technology, but you have to have plan B.
Ryanair this morning downgrading its demand expectations, its pricing expectations. What are you seeing in terms of demand and pricing?
You know, we have recorded record profit last financial year.
Yep.
And we keep getting asked this question. And we continue to say no, demand is there. However, the proof is in the pudding. Our first quarter of this financial year is another record profit. It is way more than the net profit that we have recorded in the first quarter of last year. And it is also exceeding our
So is demand
budget.
accelerating?
It is. From what we see, it is.
Okay. You are going to unveil in an hour or so your new premium class cabin, your first class cabin, your business class cabin. It's what you've got. It's the Q Suite. And it's going to go into the 777X, which is an aeroplane that we're all waiting for.
Yeah.
It's the new Boeing, and we've been waiting for quite some time. And I'm wondering, kind of, if you're prepared to wait that long to put this new product into this new aeroplane. Does it have to be the new Q Suite with the new 777X?
You know, we're putting the new Q Suite on both aircrafts, the 777X and the 350.
So it's going to go in the new 350?
Absolutely, yes. And the 777X, the date that we have now from Boeing is around first quarter of 2026. 2024 is already over, so you're talking about 1 year, a year and a half.
You're confident on that date?
Yeah, we got a confirmation and a commitment from Boeing that they will be able to deliver the aircraft on this date.
So where do we see it? Where do we need it? Where do we see this new Q Suite first? Is it going to be on the 350 or the 777X?
It will be on the 777X.
Right. And if it's delayed any further, that changes. You'll put it into the 350.
Yes.
We're also expecting a big order from Qatar. We thought it might come at this air show.
Yeah.
There were rumours. There was
Yes.
some expectation.
There's still rumours.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a big order.
Yep.
So we want to take our time in evaluating the bids or the offers that we received from Boeing and Airbus.
Yep.
We're busy evaluating both offers. We're in continuous discussion with both manufacturers, and we're aiming to conclude the deal, the decision by, I would not say in this year, maybe in the beginning of next year.
Where's the delay? Like, you're evaluating the offers, so you've got what you need, or are you still waiting for what you need?
We got what we got. Partially, we got what we need.
Yep.
And the offers, but we asked for something different this time from both manufacturers, and this is where we're spending some time in the discussion with them.
Is it engines? Is it aircraft? Where's the challenge at the moment?
And no, there is no challenge. It's very clear what we're asked for, but the other element that we asked the manufacturers to bid for or to propose it for us, because it is something new, maybe in the industry or the way they bid for tenders. This is where we are in continuous discussion with them.
Okay. Back to the Q Suite. What difference is that going to make? Like, how do you think this is going to change the product that you are going to be able to offer, and how do you think it's going to keep you competitive?
You know, for us, the Q Suite, everybody knows the Q Suite. Either you tried it or you read about it.
Yep.
So it's been there for many years. It raised the benchmark for many years. And, we won so many awards. Our team decided to take a new challenge by basically push the bar once again, raise the benchmark, and to basically do some modification in the and I'm not talking about colors or fabrics or it's structural changes in the.
Okay, well that takes me to my next question perfectly. Structural changes, a reassessment of what the airline does. You've come in as the new CEO. You used to run the airports. You've stepped into the airline role now. All I hear about is you changing the culture in a significant way, structural changes at this airline in terms of the way that it operates. Talk me through some of the metrics you're looking at in terms of the effect that is going to have. You're loosening the way they work. You're giving them more autonomy. What effect is that going to have? What's the effect is it going to have on things like job retention? Talk me through the numbers you're looking for.
What we're trying to achieve out of this is to make our people in the company feel they're listened to and they're part of the decision and they're not scared or stressed to speak up their opinion. By the end of the day, we're getting the best, the experts in each field, in each area. And this is what we want to do, basically to have them talk about areas that matters for the company. This is on one side. So basically it's a culture of empowerment and trust. And also basically holding people accountable and liable for decisions they make. On the other hand, we've noticed with some of the easement and some of the policies that we have in place for our staff that we see some good outcome of it. Previously we had a problem in certain areas with the attrition of our staff. It was double-digit in percentage, 18-19% every month. This number dropped by 70%. So people want to stay in the company. People really appreciate working for Qatar Airways, and they see that their future is with the best airline in the world.
So staff retention is already improved significantly?
Absolutely, yes.
In terms of what that means in terms of your ability to deliver product and control costs, what effect will that have in terms of the bottom line?
By the end of the day, we're talking about numbers. Last year, we recorded, again, the highest profit in the history of the company.
Yeah.
This quarter, we are recording the highest profit in the history of the first quarter in the company.
Yep.
We're talking about percentage-wise triple digits compared to last year. So this is a proof that we're looking at revenue plus looking at reducing cost and cutting costs wherever it is necessary. As long as it will not affect the customer experience.
I've got one final quick question. I'm going to get told off for this. Rwanda Air and some of the South African airlines and other areas, talk me through what we're going to see in terms of deals.
I was hoping to announce our investment in the South African airline in this interview. However, because of some final stages.
Which name are we talking about?
Again, it's one of 3 companies.
Yeah.
And I promise you will be the first to know.
I will be the first to know. Badr Mohammed, CEO of Qatar Airways, sir, thank you very much indeed. Danny Berger in New York, back to you.
Guy, thank you very much. Guy Johnson there with the Qatar Airways CEO. And tomorrow, Guy's going to have an exclusive interview there at the Farnborough Air Show with GE CEO Larry Culp.
Coming up, Prime Minister Netanyahu heads to Washington. It's a big week for earnings. Remember those. Context matters every day on Bloomberg.
It's your Bloomberg Brief on this Monday. I'm Danny Berger alongside Manish Cranny in New York. Let's set you up for your trading day today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrives in Washington today. He's expected to meet with President Biden tomorrow and then address Congress on Wednesday. Then we do have earnings. Alphabet and Tesla, they both report on Tuesday after the bell. And then we're going to round out the week with economic data, GDP on Thursday, PCE on Friday. Then later today, Vice President Kamala Harris will deliver remarks on the South Lawn at 11:30 a.m. ET. Manis, it is an event celebrating the NCAA championship, the college teams there. But will she address her run as president?
I think it's probably one of those unavoidable avoidables. Let's hope we get a little bit of news out of it. Danny, some stocks to watch for you. Nvidia is bouncing back. It lost 9% in its value last week. And obviously, you've got CrowdStrike. That story runs on as well. Apple is up 1.125%, and you're going to get Tesla numbers this week. So again, a little bit of a tech. I mean, it was a battering, wasn't it? It was that sort of shift from tech into the Russell. You finally got your capitulation moment last week. I went on holidays. You got the Russell banging higher.
I basically had a party without you with the small caps doing well. But I had this skepticism during the whole thing of, does this last? And you see a little bit of this idea today that all these trades that people had put on that they really hoped would work at the start of the year, be it small caps, be it curve steepeners, that they finally found their excuse for it. Both inflation coming in and the Trump trade. But on a day like today, the question has to be asked, how sustainable was that? And you do see the curve flattening today.
Yeah, I mean, part of the narrative is this. You had this sort of euphoria. The bond market reacted much more virulently to the prospect of not just Trump, but of a GOP sweep. And so that, in many ways, infected that huge steepener in the curve. The question is whether Kamala Harris on the ticket really disembowels or is a headwind, as we just heard from Amundi. It's a headwind to some of those Trump trades.
Yeah, and we have to keep debating the dollar. George Saravalis has a great note out today saying that a weak dollar policy is unlikely to work.